When the first frost touched the earth in medieval Europe, the year changed. The land hardened, the sky turned gray, and the air fell silent. Winter was not simply a season, it was a siege. The cold arrived like an invading army, consuming everything it touched. Fields turned to stone, rivers froze, and the very air seemed to bite. For the people who lived through those times, survival was not guaranteed. The rich could retreat behind stone walls, surrounded by stores of food and servants to tend their fires. But the poor, the peasants, the workers, they faced the season head-on, armed only with instinct, community, and sheer endurance. To live through a medieval winter was an art form, paid for in sweat, smoke, and sacrifice. The hearth was life. In every cottage, farmhouse, and castle, fire was the beating heart of existence. Families built their entire lives around it. With no electric heaters or insulated glass windows, people relied on open flames that burned day and night. The hearth was never allowed to go out. It was too dangerous to lose that light. If it did, a family would have to beg embers from a neighbor, carrying them home in a pot wrapped in moss, because that ember could mean the difference between warmth and death. In poorer homes, chimneys were a rarity, so smoke filled the air. The ceilings were black with soot, and children coughed constantly. Yet even the smoke had its use. It preserved hanging meat, dried herbs, and hardened the thatched roof against moisture. Fire was sacred. It cooked food, boiled water, provided light, and frightened off wild animals. In winter, it was the only defense that truly mattered. Before the first storm winds howled, people prepared their clothing like warriors readying for battle. Wool was the medieval miracle, warm, water-resistant, and renewable. Men wore linen undergarments to wick away sweat, with layers of wool on top to trap heat. Those who could afford fur lined their cloaks and hoods with fox, rabbit, or sheepskin. Boots were made from thick leather, often stuffed with straw or moss for extra insulation. Gloves were a rare and precious luxury. Most peasants simply wrapped rags around their hands or went bare to work. For the few and brave who traveled during winter, merchants, messengers, pilgrims, a long cloak, a fur hat, and strong boots weren't a luxury. They were a lifeline against frostbite and exposure. The medieval person knew their survival depended on layers, not just of cloth, but of wisdom passed down through generations. But the true enemy of winter wasn't the cold, it was hunger. When the harvest ended in autumn, the countdown began. Every village stored what it could: salted meat, dried fish, smoked bacon, hard cheese, and barrels of ale. Bread was baked from rye, barley, or whatever grain survived the season. The poor often lived on thin porridge, cabbage stew, and bread so coarse it could break a tooth. They'd add herbs, roots, or even tree bark to stretch their meals. Cellars and granaries were guarded fiercely. Rats, mold, and thieves could destroy months of hard work overnight. To run out of food before spring was not misfortune. It was a death sentence. The rich fared better, dining on venison and spiced wine. But even they weren't immune. Fresh fruits and vegetables were scarce, and scurvy crept silently through all ranks of society. Still, people were resourceful. They preserved apples in straw, pickled vegetables, and made soups from bones to extract every last drop of nourishment. Every mouthful was a reminder. Preparation was life. The medieval home wasn't built for comfort. It was built for survival. Peasant cottages were made of wattle and daub, a wooden frame packed with mud, straw, and dung. The floors were hard earth, the roofs thatched with reeds. Windows were just small openings covered with oiled cloth or animal hide to block the wind. People and their animals often shared the same space. The body heat from cows, pigs, and chickens helped warm the single room. For the wealthy, stone castles were strong but freezing. Their thick walls trapped the cold just as much as the heat. Servants carried hot coals in metal pots to warm their lords' chambers, and heavy tapestries hung from the walls to block drafts. Yet every home, rich or poor, shared one thing in common: the constant, unending fight against the cold. But winter was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of the spirit. In a world ruled by faith, the season took on a sacred meaning. The darkness was seen as a trial from God, a time for reflection and endurance. Churches glowed with candlelight, their bells ringing through snow-covered villages, calling people to prayer and community. Christmas and Yuletide were moments of light amidst the shadows. Feasting, singing, and giving thanks were acts of defiance against despair. During the longest nights, people celebrated the promise that warmth and sunlight would one day return. This faith gave them meaning when reason could not. It gave them the will to wait for spring. No one survived the winter alone. When a neighbor's fire went out, others shared their embers. When one family ran low on food, the village came together. Survival was not individual, it was collective. Men gathered wood in groups. Women shared what little food they could spare. In a world divided by class, winter created a strange kind of equality. Everyone, from peasant to lord, was vulnerable to the same biting cold. Community wasn't just kindness. It was a strategy for survival. When sickness struck, medicine was scarce. The cold season brought fevers, coughs, and frostbite. People used herbs, honey, and warm wine as remedies. Garlic and vinegar were thought to ward off infection. They kept warm using any means necessary. Layers of wool, sleeping huddled together, and even burning peat or dried dung when firewood ran low. Necessity made them ingenious. They understood one simple truth: the human body could endure much, but not alone. Of course, the medieval winter was not the same for everyone. In the castles of England and France, lords dined on roasted boar and drank spiced wine by grand hearths. Outside those stone walls, peasants shivered in huts, working through the cold to cut wood and tend to livestock. If they stopped, they starved. The divide was brutal. Yet paradoxically, the peasants were often hardier. Their knowledge of the land, of storing food, managing fire, and caring for animals, was what kept entire villages alive. In the dead of winter, practical skill mattered far more than noble status. Beyond hunger and frost, there was another enemy: isolation. Winter trapped people indoors. The days were short, the nights agonizingly long. To fight the loneliness, they told stories. Tales of saints, monsters, and heroes filled the dark hours. The fire was not just for heat, it was for hope. It was a glowing reminder that they were still alive. And then, slowly, the snow began to melt. Drip by drip, the ice retreated. Green returned to the fields. The first lambs were born. The rivers began to flow again, carrying away the silence of winter. For those who survived, spring was not just a season, it was a resurrection. They rebuilt what the cold had taken, tilled the soil, and buried their dead. Every survivor carried the memory of that winter within them, a reminder of what human endurance truly meant. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this glimpse into the past as fascinating as I do, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.